It's the early hours of January 1st, 2020. The world is quiet, eerily so, the kind of silence that lingers after fireworks fade. Laughter dies down, and the echoes of New Year's celebrations disappear into the cold night. Streetlights cast a pale glow on empty streets, and most people are still asleep, cocooned in blankets and the fragile comfort of a new beginning. But on a quiet street in Duffield, Derbyshire, the first morning of the year is about to shatter that peace. Inside one ordinary-looking home, a tragedy is already taking shape, one that will rip two families apart, leave three children without their mother, and shock a community that once trusted the man behind it all. A man who stood at the front of classrooms, shaping young minds. A head teacher, respected, admired, and yet capable of committing a darkness that no one could have imagined. This is the story of Rhys Hancock, a story of jealousy, heartbreak, obsession, and control. A story that begins quietly, but ends in violence, leaving a mark that will linger long after the sun rises on that fateful New Year's morning. This is the case of Rhys Hancock, a story of jealousy, heartbreak, control, and a night where everything went horribly wrong. Before the crime, before the panic, before the headlines, there were three people: real, imperfect, human. Helen Hancock was a mother of three, kind, warm, the kind of woman whose presence could calm a room. But behind her gentle smile lay years of quiet, suffering from a marriage that had slowly drained her spirit. By late 2019, she had finally found the courage to step away, to reclaim herself. For the first time in years, she could breathe freely, laugh fully, and begin to feel alive again. Martin Griffiths entered her life like a calm sunrise after a long storm. Gentle, steady, and patient, he offered something Helen hadn't known in years: safety, understanding, and kindness. He didn't push, he didn't rush, he simply showed her she could trust again. Slowly, carefully, a new chapter began to take shape, filled with fragile hope and quiet healing. And then there was Rhys Hancock. On paper, he was a respected head teacher, admired by colleagues, trusted by parents, a man who seemed to have it all together. But behind that public image was a man unraveling, consumed by anger, jealousy, and a desperate need for control. As Helen found freedom, he felt it slipping from his grasp, and the more she healed, the darker his obsession became. Three lives, once intertwined, were now moving in different directions. Two were finding peace. One was sinking into rage. And on a cold January morning, those paths would collide with devastating consequences. Helen and Rhys had been married for 11 years. But those years were far from easy. What looked like a stable marriage on the outside was, behind closed doors, a slow erosion of trust, respect, and safety. There were arguments that left bruises on the spirit, long silences that carried more tension than words ever could, and a constant undercurrent of control and manipulation. Every day, Helen felt herself shrinking, bending to a life that no longer felt like her own, mentally and emotionally exhausted from the weight of it all. Eventually, she made the hardest decision a person can make in such a situation. She left, not out of selfishness, not out of anger, not out of cruelty. She left for safety. She left for peace. She left for her children to give them a chance at a life that wasn't defined by fear. But leaving a controlling partner doesn't always mean freedom. Often, It's the moment when danger quietly escalates, when anger festers, and when obsession begins to take root. For Helen, the calm she hoped for was fragile. Beneath the surface, a storm was quietly gathering, a storm that would soon become unstoppable. When Helen met Martin, it was as if a piece of her that had been buried for years finally resurfaced. Her friends noticed it almost immediately. She walked differently, with a lightness in her step she hadn't carried in over a decade. Her laughter came easier, brighter, like someone finally remembering how to breathe fully. She seemed healthier, more alive, and for the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Not as someone's wife, not as someone defined by a failing marriage, but simply as Helen in all her strength and warmth. But to Rhys, her newfound happiness wasn't freedom. It was a challenge, a threat, a provocation. Every smile, every laugh, every small spark of joy in her life poured fuel onto the fire that had been quietly burning in him for months. He didn't just feel hurt, he felt replaced, discarded, betrayed, and that sense of loss twisted into something dark, obsessive, and dangerous. Slowly, deliberately, he began to watch her. Every post she shared online, every message she sent, every detail of her life with Martin became his fixation. He questioned her friends. He interrogated her subtly, planting seeds of fear. And in private, he confided to people around him a terrifying truth. He planned to kill them both. These were not drunken threats or impulsive outbursts. They were deliberate, calculated, and chillingly calm. Clear warnings of a mind consumed by rage, and a plan forming with terrifying precision. Yet, those around him dismissed the signs, believing it to be anger, jealousy, perhaps even exaggeration. No one realized how real, how imminent, and how deadly the danger had become. Beneath the surface, a storm was gathering. Quiet, relentless, and invisible to the world, but unstoppable and about to explode. As the country counted down to the end of 2019, people filled the streets with laughter and fireworks. Families toasted the new year. Couples kissed under exploding colors. Strangers hugged as they shouted Happy New Year, hoping the next 12 months would be kinder than the last. But while millions celebrated, Rhys Hancock stood on the outside of that joy, watching it through a haze of alcohol and bitterness. His world wasn't beginning anew, it was collapsing. Inside the silence of his home, he paced with a restless, angry energy. Bottle after bottle disappeared as he drank, not to forget, but to fuel something dark. Every firework outside felt like an insult, a reminder that life was moving on without him, that Helen was moving on without him. As the night grew colder, Rhys grew more unstable. He sent unsettling messages, angry, rambling, full of resentment. He drove around aimlessly, gripping the wheel with a kind of cold determination, replaying every grievance in his mind until they twisted into something far more dangerous. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was intention. It was planned. It was a mind slipping into a place where reason couldn't reach him. And by the time the clock struck midnight when the world embraced new beginnings, Rhys had already chosen an ending. The decision was made. The path was set, and there was no turning back. At 4 a.m., when the world was wrapped in silence, and most homes were still lost in sleep, Rhys Hancock climbed into his car. The night was cold, the streets empty, but his mind was anything but still. Every thought, every heartbeat carried a chilling resolve. He drove straight to the house where Helen was staying with Martin. In his hands, he carried 2 knives, instruments of a rage that had been quietly building for months. The house appeared ordinary in the darkness, unremarkable, safe. But safety was an illusion that morning. Rhys broke in, moving through the rooms with terrifying calm. His footsteps were deliberate. He made his way to the bedroom, and there, in that small, familiar space, he found them. Helen and Martin, 2 people simply trying to start a new chapter, unaware that danger had already arrived. What followed happened in an instant. Sudden, brutal, and fueled by jealousy that had festered for far too long. It was the breaking point of months of obsession, anger, and control, unleashed in a moment no one could have imagined. Neighbors heard screams pierce the quiet night. A frantic call was made to the police, but by the time officers arrived, it was already too late. Both Helen and Martin were gone. 2 lives extinguished in minutes. A mother who had just begun to find herself again. A father who had offered kindness and safety. 2 people who deserved love, security, and a future, all taken in an instant by someone they had once trusted. After the attack, Rhys didn't flee. He didn't hide in the shadows or try to erase the evidence of what he had done. Instead, he walked to his car, each step deliberate, carrying a chilling calm that made the night feel heavier, colder. He sat behind the wheel, picked up his phone, and dialed the police. When the operator answered, his voice was strikingly flat, almost clinical. There was no panic, no hesitation, no remorse. He spoke as if he were reading from a script, detailing every moment of what had just happened. He gave precise instructions where to find the bodies, what had been done, and what the police would see when they arrived. It was unnerving, the kind of voice that makes you realize the mind behind it is completely detached from the horror it has caused. Every word was measured, deliberate, as if he were narrating someone else's crime to someone he was studying rather than living. Minutes later, the officers arrived, hearts heavy, senses alert, and there it was, the scene exactly as Rhys had described. The horror, the finality, the silence of 2 lives cut short, all matching the calm, emotionless confession he had given over the phone. It was a moment that would haunt everyone involved, not just for the lives lost, but for the terrifying detachment of a man who had destroyed them with a quiet, calculated resolve. In that still, early morning, the enormity of the crime was impossible to ignore, and the ripples would be felt far beyond that house, far beyond that night. The news spread like wildfire. Shock, disbelief, and sorrow rippled through the community. Helen's 3 children were left in a world without their mother, their lives suddenly hollowed by grief and confusion. Martin's family, too, was shattered. Their sense of safety and normalcy ripped away in a single, incomprehensible act. Friends and neighbors struggled to make sense of it all. How could someone they had trusted, someone who had stood at the front of a classroom, a head teacher responsible for guiding children, commit something so brutally personal and calculated? The betrayal was deeper than the act itself. It was a reminder that evil can hide behind a polished public image, a calm voice, a respected career. As the community mourned, they began to see the layers of pain that had gone unnoticed. Helen's suffering had not been visible to the world. It had not left scars that could be seen in photographs or headlines. it had been quiet. Insidious emotional manipulation, controlling behavior, and fear that whispered behind closed doors. The tragedy made one truth painfully clear: abuse doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it hides in silence, in control, in the quiet terror that one human can wield over another. And as the days passed, the heartbreak lingered, not just for the lives taken, but for the love, hope, and potential that had been stolen along with them. Helen and Martin's deaths became a stark, haunting reminder of the invisible dangers that can exist behind doors we think are safe, and of the courage it takes to step away before it's too late. When the case finally went to court, the world watched in a mixture of horror and disbelief. Rhys Hancock did not deny what he had done. He pleaded guilty to both murders, sparing the families a prolonged trial but offering no relief from the weight of grief. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Helen's children sat with relatives, clinging to one another, their eyes wide and uncomprehending. Martin's family, stoic yet broken, struggled to contain the waves of sorrow crashing over them. Friends and neighbors, many of whom had once respected Rhys as a head teacher and community leader, now faced the incomprehensible truth. The man they trusted was capable of unspeakable violence. The judge, speaking with a measured but firm voice, described the killings as brutal, ferocious, and premeditated. Rhys Hancock was sentenced to 35 years in prison before becoming eligible for release, a number that seemed impossibly small compared to the lives and love he had destroyed. But no sentence, no courtroom declaration could restore what had been lost. No law could bring back the mother, the father, the laughter, or the quiet moments of hope that Helen and Martin had begun to rebuild. What remained was a community haunted by the knowledge that control and obsession can hide behind intelligence, charm, and authority, and that the warning signs of domestic abuse are often subtle, invisible, yet deadly. Experts in domestic violence note that leaving an abusive partner is statistically the most dangerous time for victims, a fact that underscores the tragedy of Helen's story. Her courage to step away, to protect herself and her children, should have been met with safety, not fatal violence. And yet, it was this very act of bravery that triggered the culmination of months of obsession, manipulation, and unchecked rage. In the end, the Rhys Hancock case is more than a story of two lives lost. It is a reminder that abuse is not always visible, that danger can hide behind familiar faces, and that courage does not always guarantee safety. Helen and Martin's lives were stolen, but their story serves as a stark, haunting lesson. To pay attention to the quiet signs, to trust instincts, and to act before obsession becomes tragedy. Helen and Martin's lives may have ended, but their story will not be forgotten. It is a chilling reminder that darkness can hide behind the most familiar faces. If you want to uncover more real-life mysteries, shocking crimes, and stories that reveal the human side of tragedy, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, because the truth is often stranger and far more haunting than fiction.